To get us started here, let me switch positions real fast. Oops. Start from the beginning. All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to Conversational Collective. We are an open, inclusive community who's exploring conversational technology and creating that conversational technology. I'm your host, Lauren Golembeski. I'm super excited for this event today. We have a few things to go over, so I'm going to jump into some of these things before we have our amazing speakers join us for some lightning talks about the nuts and bolts of conversational interfaces. So first, a big shout out to the Convo Collective organizers, most of whom are here on this call. Some are kind of stuck in this really horrible weather situation that's happening throughout the country, but in particular in Texas, we have a lot of folks in Texas. So just keep them in your thoughts that they get through this. Some of the folks on this call just filled up their bathtubs with water because things in Austin aren't doing super well, but give a shout out to Brittany, Christy, Jessica, Matt, and Meredith, who all make this community work. It's a labor of love. We have a great year of programming that we're working on, so we're really excited to bring you guys more events every month on the third Wednesday of each month, barring any other kind of holidays or events where we slightly switch that up sometimes. Thanks to our sponsor, Voxable. Voxable is a conversation design platform that helps teams design, test, and refine their conversation designs before implementing them. I also happen to be co-founder and CEO of Voxable. If you're interested in checking us out, we have a beta list sign up. We're looking for people to test out our product and learn from y'all. So head over to voxable.io to do that. Also, join the Convo Collective community. If you follow this link, you can sign up for our community. That does a few things for us. It gives us feedback about what you're looking for in a conversational interface community. You'll get access, automatically get access to our newsletter, and you can join our Slack channel and LinkedIn group. And I believe for the Slack channel, that's one of the only ways to really get an invite. So sign up on that form. If you don't want to sign up on the form and give us feedback, you can just subscribe to our newsletter. That's the best way to stay in the know about what's happening at Convo Collective. We don't spam you. We don't share your emails. We send one email a month letting you know what's going on with us and share some valuable resources and tips from the industry. So you can sign up for our newsletter at that link. Also follow us on Eventbrite. That's where we post and manage all of our events. So if you follow us there, you'll be sure to see when we post a new event. All right, event notes. I know a bunch of you are introducing yourselves in the chat. That's great. We have these great speakers that are going to be talking to us. Kind of take their cues if they ask for any questions along the talk. If not, we'll have a time at the end of the talk to ask questions. And you can use that raise hand functionality that's in Zoom. If you're not familiar with where it is, it's going to be on that control panel area, wherever it is floating on your screen, usually at the bottom. And there should be an emoji reaction. Once you open that up, there's a raise hand button. And then you can unraise your hand once your question has been answered or you changed your mind and you don't want to ask a question. And I should mention that all these links that I've shared are in the chat. So open up that chat window if you want to follow any of these links and don't have to type out a bit.ly link. Also, after this event, join us on Clubhouse. We're hanging out at Clubhouse for a post-event chat. This is the link that's also handily in that chat, so you can click on it. And we'll just be chatting for about an hour about conversational interfaces, about the event, any continuing conversation. Join us there. Clubhouse is pretty cool, especially cool for the conversation industry. We were just talking about this before the event started, and I know a lot of us have just gotten onto the platform and are kind of dipping in and out of different clubhouse rooms. It's a great place to socialize, to have discussions, and you don't have to be on camera. So after this, you can change into your sweats and, well, like I will, not have to be on camera. All right, this is our agenda for the evening. Just about done with this intro. We're gonna bring up Sanjeev here in a moment. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen and let that transition happen. Then we'll go to John and discussion afterwards. All right, sorry about that. I just...
Thanks, Laura. I think I'm not yet able to share my screen. Now I can.
Yeah, okay, great.
All right. Hey, everyone. Sanjeev Nair here, co-founder at NLPBOTS. I'm based in San Francisco and really happy to be here today. Looking forward to an interesting conversation post the talk. And a little bit about a background about myself, about 22 years in the area of enterprise conversation design. I've seen the world change from the dot-com bubble times to, to client-server architecture-related applications, followed by the appearance of SaaS and all things AI since 2012. So it's been a really incredible journey and so much of innovation over the years. Yeah, but that has got nothing to do with my age whatsoever. So let's just move on to the next, I guess. Let me start. Laura, we good to start, right?
Yes, absolutely. And apologies, I didn't get up my notes to do that intro for you.
No.
But you did a perfectly great job of introing yourself. Thanks for rolling with it. And yeah, you're good to start. We can see your screen and the presentation is working great.
All right, super. So the last, so the AI area, the last 6 years, we've been completely focused on enterprise conversations and automation of workflows that cater to employee experiences and customer experiences, everything to do with the day-to-day operations of an enterprise. Anyway, that's just to give a background of where the learnings come from and what has been my journey so far. But today's focus is about the UX of conversation design and what a few things in terms of what any person who's looking at creating conversational experiences or designing them should consider. So let's look at the elephant in the room: intent. We've seen a lot of problems, a lot of discussion about how good is intent, whether intents really work, intent-driven conversation design works or not. And frankly speaking, the other day on Clubhouse, somebody mentioned that intent should die. And it's pretty, so it's gotten to that level because scalability is always an issue when it comes to conversation design. Anyway, from a user experience designer's perspective, I feel intent is core to what we do. And it's more about what does a business want to really focus on when it comes to implying, to setting up a conversational experience. At the same time, what does an audience member or what does a visitor want from a conversation experience? So in user experience, we've always seen the process of first looking at information and then following it up with analyzing the information that you get, planning out the decisions, and then planning out the actions to drive a conversational experience. So when you look at it in a different way, it's more about the purpose. So what is the reason or what is the motivation that drives businesses to create these experiences? What is the end goal they're looking at? And what is the end goal that a visitor or a customer is looking at when it comes to engaging with that experience? And when the user experience designer focuses on that, you pretty much get things right most of the time. So conversations take place, we all know this, we are all dealing with technology to drive these things, right? So conversations today take place in text messages, chat applications, email, voice, IoT, etc. But I'd like to think about it in a different way. What I look at when I talk to people and try and advocate user experience concepts is go to the basics. For me, conversations, or rather for everybody who's into design, they should look at conversations in everyday life, right? So it's about asking something, learning something, transacting on something, helping with something, and basically getting something done. So the premise of conversation is about achieving something, an end goal, right? And that's where the focus has to be. I think when we approach things from this perspective, the way we look at a design task, it becomes very different. So moving on to need analysis, it starts with that. Assess what is it that we need, right? How does a user perceive things? How does a business perceive things? And then, of course, for any experience, you consider the certain things that you need to make it memorable or not, right? And then that's where you drive to the next step. I love Bill Watterson, so I keep using his. It's a great way to kind of look at the humor and everything around us while really making connect with what we're trying to say, right? So for a business or for a user experience designer, the primary thing is, where is the user coming from, right? And we're always caught up with the question of, what is the channel I need to have an experience built on? Should it be voice? Should it be text? Should it be a hybrid model? Should it be social media, or what, right? And how do my conversations map out? How do I look at an omnichannel or multimodal experience? And those are the challenges you need to address. So looking at a typical example, we've seen this everywhere on the internet. A classical example when you talk about chatbots as is that of a booking engine. So person asks about a question on booking a flight, and we're looking at these are the various conversation parts that a user experience designer may consider, right? And you have a couple of them which have got arrows pointed, which are basically using the assumptions that he's looking at something for that day. So it's just a reference of the content that you refer to drive the conversation flow. But the point here is, when you're looking at this kind of a conversation flow, do you see voice as a channel that this is going to work on? Probably not. But if you consider this adapted on text as a medium, it will be just one response that helps the user just select a few drop downs, drop downs, and then it may end up becoming, the conversation flows towards a booking quite fast. So the mode of conversation really matters a lot, and it depends on the scenario that you're trying to address. The same conversation can also be handled when someone says, show me flights to an XYZ place, and does not give the source. And then the user experience designer's thought has to be, do we have data to identify where the user is coming from? Are we tracking, say, location information? For that, we are again considering, where is the user coming from? Is he coming using a mobile phone? Or do we have session information, which is based on his previous visit to the website where he was just browsing around? Things like that, right? And then so if you don't get that information, then what is the prompt to say? So you're going to ask the user for the origin city, and he'll state that. And then following that, you have the standard flow of conversation parts that to take, but, and maybe you could do this, but again, you're giving a user a recommendation, asking whether he wants to see special offers, whereas he's actually waiting for an answer to his initial question. So is that the right user experience is a question I would ask, right? But again, this is just to give you an example of how various conversation paths can come up based on the scenario at every point in time, based on the data needs or the data availability that a user experience designer has to look at, right? Double clicking on the same thing, you can see that if you are aligning very closely with a business need, you may have multiple paths that the conversation can lead to. You may want to check on whether that person if the existing user is a frequent flyer or not. Does he have special services? Is he a member of a club? Is there anything else we can actually adapt to personalize this conversation? Because that's what really drives to a better experience for the end user, as well as meets the goals of the business. So over time, we've seen that based on scenarios, text is basically a great medium. It's been there for a long time. Complex conversations can be designed on there. You can have various workflows. You can do non-linear flows very well. And you can really engage the user. It's there. Voice is something that is limited to, it works better for support services, wherein the primary data about the user is already there, and you can actually, just register a problem, things like that. Or linear flows and tasks can be done. Or entertainment, as you see in IoT devices, can be managed on voice. But the most promising area I see is a hybrid conversational experience, which involves text, voice, and video. And that I see a lot of interest even from the enterprise side. In fact, most recently we've automated a workflow for an enterprise wherein truck delivery, the truck drivers who are delivering large amounts of material, they drive into material gate and they're doing a complete self-served process of checking in, and it is involving a camera, a tab, and basically instructions on a screen, and the system is automatically scanning the documents and checking them in and saving a whopping 2 hours per truck, in terms of efficiency, and that is a huge thing. So basically, you need to. There are multiple ways you can look at, managing a conversation for the same workflow, depending on where the user is coming from. And this leads us to a typical way of how user experience designers, as well as anybody who's creating experience, has to look at it. So I call it the state of mind analysis. Basically, it means when you have a conversation between two people as humans, there's so many cues, they're cognitive inputs we get, and we are kind of analyzing things. We are understanding what the user's state of mind is. We are empathizing with the user on the other side, and we run through the conversation to get to a certain goal. How do you do that in conversation design? So you start with the standard questions of who is the user, where is he coming from, is he a registered user, is he a new user, is he a returning user, right? And then map it to the personas and journeys and stuff that you already created initially, right? And then you look at the whys. Why is the user there? Is he for a transaction? Does he need information? Does he or she have an issue? And then you map it to empathy references. What is the state? What is the thought process? What is the mental state that the person may have, from an empathy perspective? And then plan out what could be the conversation parts there, right? The next thing is obviously the channel. Where are they engaging via? So that you can understand the limitations or the capabilities of the channel to then leverage that to manage the conversation better, right? And then, of course, the core purpose. Is it serviceable? If it is not serviceable, how can we take it down to a path wherein you can still leave the door open for that customer or the visitor, And if it is serviceable, then what are the actions to take? What are the instructions to build on in terms of a conversational flow? And then what are the results that can be achieved? And what are the remedies in case there are failure states? So all of this is basically leads you to a we call it the minimum viable conversational concept, right? Which is driven by a state of mind analysis. I'm going to rush through this because it's lightning and we've got a very short amount of time. So in case any questions later, I'm happy to talk about it later. But after all this, I think the most critical thing is that the customer is only focused on getting things done, which is the end goal, right? This example you see on the screen is that of, it's a screenshot from one of our client implementations where this is an internal chatbot that is used for all their employees across multiple locations, and it was to manage their support requests. So if you notice the question, the issue that is posted by somebody is that he's got an issue with the laptop, and then the system is automatically able to fetch his information as well as load up all the relevant assets assigned to him by the company. And then all he has to do is just type in the problem and just hit submit. So reporting of an issue is done in seconds. And this was not happening earlier because they still use a legacy system in the back end. It was very painful for employees to log in, navigate through the various menus, select things, and then submit a problem. But post doing this, they have seen a huge amount of requests come in, and they've actually discovered the problems on the internal processes, and it's really helped them. So it comes down to ROI, right? And over a period of time, the same implementation can add more capabilities. You can then look at knowledge, searching for employees, connecting with other people. You can connect with the knowledge base, and then you have a single window assistant that really drives conversations across a wide range of things, and that's where the utility kicks in. I'm a huge advocate for utility of whatever kind of automation you build in. So this is an example of that. And again, you may notice that when we talk about conversations, it's not necessarily free-flowing conversations. A lot of conversations are based on visual cues, tasks to be done, things to click on and do stuff. As long as the end goal is met, the interface manages that, it becomes a successful automation. This is something we've done in the B2C space. And anyways, I'm going to just skip through this one. Getting to the next important point is that of user perspective. it is the most important thing, because that's what gives you a sense of what the user is thinking about your service or your product or your business. It also gives you an ability, the better you understand where the user's perspective stands about the service, the better you're able to build on latent needs, and create preventive as well as predictive conversation flows. For example, what you see on the screen is an email from a voice assistant that someone has received. It says that, you know what, I remember you were looking for these shoes earlier, and I'm happy to inform you that this is available. So the user is probably not thinking about it. He or she may have looked at those shoes a week earlier, but then what is interesting here is the magic of the content writing here, wherein you're saying that I remembered you were looking. So there's a sense of empathy, there's a sense of personalization in a way that makes the user somewhat, find it endearing. And that's the whole focus that you need to have in terms of building personalized conversations to drive engagement and loyalty. The same thing here is this. The second example is that of how do you proactively offer to generate a quote. Maybe the person is not looking at it, but it's a health insurance related product. So there's a lot of anxiety and concern about the cost of it. So this becomes a very easy way to break the ice and get the user flow, down a certain conversation path. And of course, when you're looking at something like Duolingo, where you have they sign up for the app because they want to get to learning learning a language. And if you give them certain tips in between or opportunities in between to skip the line, it's always a great gratifying thing wherein they can test their skills and also feel good about moving a couple of levels up. So I think this is a very interesting way of managing the conversation here. Language is always tricky, but the core thing is user need does not change no matter where you are. At the core, us as humans, what we need from a service. There's so many times, I'm sure all of us, we've called in, we are trying to navigate something through contacts, through the contact us page on a website, getting to support, and where all we want to do is talk to a human on the other side, right? That's the need. The core need is I want some feedback. I want to get acknowledged for something. I want to know what the status of something is. So that doesn't change as far as the end user is concerned. The language may be influenced by my cultural background, my location and stuff. And that can be managed by the guys who do linguistics and language and all that stuff. But from a user experience perspective, I think the focus always has to be on the user need. That brings us to failure states. The most important thing that people that I had to point in this case is people always worry about failure states. I see failure states as a huge opportunity. It's a great way for brands and businesses to say that, you know what, we know there is a problem, and we're working on it. We're concerned about you, and we're making sure that we're putting the effort. Nothing is perfect. Everybody knows that, but it's only about acknowledging the fact and saying that we're addressing it in the right way, right? So you have services API failures that happen all the time. Now this is the same example of API failure. We're not able to fetch flights based on what the query was, and we're telling the user, you know what, there's a problem, but we can have a booking assistant call you back. So you're kind of enabling an escalation flow, but you're telling the customer that, you know what, we'll get back to you as soon as we have access ourselves. So tell us how to get in touch with you, either call or email. So you are opening up a possibility wherein if it is a new user, he's gonna give you either an email or a phone number, and you add that to a sales flow. And if it's an existing customer, it's okay. You're just validating the data you already have, and you're just making sure that he knows that we'll be in touch. Things like that, right? And that really goes a long way. The second thing is obviously when there is a data or a training related failure, which is, I frankly have, I hate it when I see someone says, I'm sorry, I did not understand that, or sorry, I'm not trained to answer that. That's a problem. I'd rather that you either give me an escalation flow into a support ticket thing, or else you directly scale it up to a human agent if possible, and that makes it a much more engaging user experience flow. And of course, you have the third type of failure, which is a business inventory related. You just don't have the product. So what do you do? So somebody's looking at booking a holiday in a specific place where you don't have that. That's already booked. You offer something else and see what happens. So it's about, we know what your need is, and these are the options you have, and then you kind of lead them to hopefully click on something and close it up. So, and what you should not do is this, wherein this is something that happened with me, and I have the habit of taking screenshots every time. So I wanted to talk to somebody. It said the agent is going to be available in 9 to 10 minutes, and then It gives me option of leave the queue and continue chatting with the bot. Why would I want to leave the queue and chat with the bot when the first reason I'm waiting there is to talk to somebody, right? So this is a very bad example here. So I'd rather that this was about, okay, if you can't wait, leave your email and we'll get in touch with you. Leave your number, we'll get in touch. That is a better way of doing it. Not just saying, okay, get out of the queue and chat with the bot. Doesn't make any sense. So this is a big no-no, right? And so the most important thing obviously is data drives narrative. How do you, a user experience designer should always be looking at what is happening on the experience on across various touch points. How do you keep track of what the user is saying? What is the user contributing? Is the user clicking a thumbs down on something? Why? And ask those questions, because that is not for just, data is not for just a business analyst to look at. I think user experience designers need to be at the center of the whole thing, because they understand both sides of the story. They understand the business need and the user need, and this is where it all changes, right? These are the key things that drive iterations to your existing flows. Goals and ROI for the business can be mapped based on the data. You can actually justify the changes you make, the path flows that the journeys that you suggest, and feedback loop builds huge amount of confidence for the end user. It's like, if I'm the user, I'm engaging with, let's say, a training or a knowledge base driven, maybe an onboarding tool, and the tool is urging me along the way, and so my long-term goal of getting from point A to point B in terms of my skill level is managed by the application. I start to depend on the application. It becomes an indispensable part of my overall journey with the product or the business. And that is where we need to get to. How do you make it into a habit, right? So that every day in the morning I wake up, I need anything, I'm just asking Alexa, or I'm just typing into my virtual assistant, and it gets me everything, or whatever I need. So that's it in a nutshell. I know I've been rushing through it, keeping in mind the time. So what's the secret sauce? Well, you need people who are great at user personas, journeys, thinking about the purpose, managing and defining the various channels, get a clear understanding of that. You need to map it with content, conversations, conversation paths and designs, building of graphic assets, great designers, right? Technology, you need the right tools to drive all these conversations. You should be able to manage multiple flows, nested flows and things like that. So platform is obviously a huge area in this. Integrations, availability of tapping in into CRMs, ERP systems, HRMS, all those things come into play. Business workflows come into play. And end goals, management of end goals. You need a project manager who can really look at where we want to get to this from a long-term goal, or I would say a process owner who drives that. And of course, the most key part again is user testing. You need somebody to give you objective feedback. You need to manage the feedback cycles into your design process and drive it. And then all of this put together brings you the only secret sauces here is teamwork. To achieve any successful experience across the board, you need to have great teamwork. This evolves with time. And what happens is when you have people from different walks of life, technology, business, user experience, testing, and all this to come together, you automatically build a design thinking team that drives very interesting conversations. And the underlined statement at the takeaway at all of this is that the user experience designer's thought is not final. You'll see there's so many gems to be discovered when you start talking to a business leader, or maybe even a tester in this whole process. And it's been so much of a revelation for me myself, and I've been doing this for a while. So yeah, so I end it here talking about Grice's maxims is something that every user experience designer should follow. I think with regard to conversation design, the concepts and the rules that define any kind of human-to-human conversation and how it's evolved over time is defined by that. And I think that's a huge, very interesting thing to keep pinned on your board or whatever it is. And I'll end it at this. And I'm working on with some interesting folks, very great minds, and we're coming up with Sanjeev, which is a consulting venture on conversation design consulting, conversation experiences across everything. And I'm leading into that with a book that we are working on. It's been slow because of all the other crazy work we're doing. But yeah, I have a simple link where anybody here can register, and it's a free book any which way. So once we're out, it'll be emailed out to whoever it is. Thank you so much for this, and I hope it has been interesting. And I'm open to questions either now or later, whenever. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sanjeev. That was great. Feel free to raise your hand for questions. I know you covered a ton of questions that people had sent already, from the specific use cases that are great for voice and chat to, what the actual process is for, best practices around UX design and development. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit. I know a lot of people have asked, like, how do you do and approach user research for a voice and chatbot? What are some of the activities that are going on in that process for you?
Okay. So the user research that we do does not differ much from your standard user experience processes for any kind of application design. But let me talk to what we have done with one of our large enterprise clients, right? So we were creating, we had to create an automation for that caters to a 10,000 man company with multiple user profiles, right? Basically, you had factory workers who were not very educated, but hands-on with stuff, but they had basic needs in terms of welfare, understanding information about welfare specific to the location they were in. That is one. Then you had corporate workers who were more hands-on with technology, aware of things to do and stuff like that, and they had needs in terms of support related queries, in terms of system access and maybe Mediclaim, insurance, and things like that, whatever. So what we had to do, the process was, first we sat down with their the process owners as well as with their HR teams, got some kind of a persona map from their team, build that into and use that to create our internal personas, mapped it with our standard findings for the industry, and then we conducted interviews. So the interviews had to be basically, we created a survey and then went and again, each of these survey was tailored to, so it is a generic survey in terms of what are the needs, that to identify the needs that each of these user types had. And then based on that, we went back, we looked at a set of data that we needed to really have as a must-have on the first launch of the virtual assistant on the internet. Of course, along the way, we also discovered problems, as in a lot of workers in certain locations did not have access to smartphones, but still they wanted to be provided the service. So what do you do for that and things? So those things came up as problem areas that the business and us, we had to actually then figure out how do we manage conversational flow there and drive it. But in a nutshell, it came down to mapping out simple interviews after understanding the breakup of the various types of people in the org, and then driving it from there on.
Awesome. That's such a great overview of some of the complexity within that. And I love to hear the user interview emphasis, because so often I feel like teams are afraid to go and talk to users and and really build that rapport.
Yeah. So what we've seen in some enterprises is that they don't want to. They feel that spending time talking to their users is not valuable, is what they realize. They feel that because they think that, hey, we've been doing this, we know the processes, we know our people, just get this done in this way. And then it is a challenge always to say, you know what, there are so many needs that never come up so it's like when if I send out a survey internally as owner of an enterprise, I may not always get the right answers, because people don't know how those answers are perceived by the management. But if you go in as a third party and you talk to them, you present them an idea or a concept, and you keep it generic enough, that's when you really understand the pulse of what their needs are, and then you use that to drive. I'm not saying it's easy, but then you then can make certain suggestions to the management so they understand where it has to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome, fantastic. We'll have some more time for questions after our next lightning talk. So if any of y'all in the audience are ruminating on some of this and thinking about this, maybe signing up for that ebook that Sanjeev mentioned, and checking out some of those materials, you'll have a chance to raise your hand again at the end, and continue the conversation. And we'll be talking more about some of the stuff on Clubhouse afterwards. So fantastic. We're gonna get to our next speaker, John Kelvie. And so I think we're gonna be switching out some things. So John is CEO, founder of Bespoken, which is an automated testing and monitoring platform. I really like the juxtaposition of these two talks because Sanjeev is talking a lot about the UX and the, all the preparation that you do to build out this interface. And I think Bespoken comes in as an automated testing tool. So it's kind of post implementation, how you continually tool and monitor and kind of update those things. So I'm going to pass it over to John to get started. I'm really excited to hear more about automated testing and the value it has to conversational interfaces.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So I'm going to share my screen here. Great. I hope folks can see that. So yeah, thanks for having me here this evening. As Lauren was saying, I'm John Kelvie. I'm the founder and CEO of Bespoken. And what we do is testing, training, and monitoring. We are, I think, recognized as the leader in that. We're the only company recognized by both Amazon and Google for that role. And we're proud to be grizzled veterans of the voice space since we've been doing this since 2017, which is really not that long ago, but it does seem like quite some time. And companies work with us to accelerate the life cycle of building out voice and chat bots. And then once they have those chatbots live, really making sure that they work optimally. And some of the companies we work with, you'll see there at the bottom. We've definitely seen a lot of use cases in our time working with conversational AI. And the way in which we ensure these systems work correctly, it does come down to this testing, training, and monitoring. And so testing, I think, is a process that almost everybody's familiar with. It's talking about making sure the functionality is correct, making sure that the system works correctly. And it's really focused on, making sure that it's reliable and efficient. And high quality. And obviously that is a concern for chatbots, just as it is with any other type of system that you have. But with AI, there are more specific concerns, and one of them is training. And so I think everyone who's worked with these systems, you see that there's challenges with the speech recognition, there may be challenges with the NLU. The training, you may also refer to this as tuning, that is an integral part of really making sure that it works well. And so that's the process of really optimizing your language model, your intent model, increasing the accuracy of the speech recognition, increasing the accuracy of the NLU, really a critical concern. And then the last piece is monitoring. And we do this, this really is just taking those first two categories and then applying it on a recurring basis. And so it's using stuff like DevOps, which many of you may be familiar with, to apply your testing routinely. And that can be every 10 minutes, every hour, every day, every week. There's, with larger customers that we work with, they may have different types of testing they're performing at each of those different intervals, depending on the complexity of the system and the number of different aspects they're trying to look at. And so, part of what we help people with and part of our expertise is just helping people to do that in a thoughtful way and really get the most out of it. Obviously testing, it's important to do that on an ongoing basis. The training as well, it's just, if you've worked with these systems, you've seen over time how challenges can kind of creep up. So keeping an eye on it routinely is really critical. And what underlies all these pieces, and I won't go into a lot of depth on this, one to not talk forever, but also, I get the impression there's more designers here, so I'll try not to bore you with the technical stuff so much. But we use virtual devices, which are basically simulators. If you've ever used the Android simulator or iOS simulator, it's akin to that. And then we actually do testing with real physical devices. And there's trade-offs to each one, but we basically try to solve any sort of testing challenge we can, and do it in a way that as closely as possible imitates what a real user would do. That's kind of an essential part of how we approach these things. Obviously, we believe people should be doing unit testing and all sorts of good automation stuff on their code, but that's basically sort of out of our purview. I put this slide up here just, we're very proud of all the companies we work with. We have been in the space for some time. We've seen a lot of use cases. We've seen people come and go from the space. I think anybody who's watched the evolution of conversational AI, it's been interesting. It's been interesting to see what's taken off. It's been interesting to see what hasn't. I think we all had ideas about what would work, what wouldn't. I'd be lying if I said I really knew exactly what that was. I came into the space when chatbots were considered to be, just as dead as doornails. And, chatbots are obviously, it's huge now, and people have really found a great thread for them. But in 2016 and 17, not so much, right? So it's been really interesting to see that evolution. It's been fascinating to see the use cases. It's just been a lot of fun. So in terms of how we approach doing this, we offer for developers unit testing and load testing, which is really about making sure that the code works correctly and the system can scale. We offer end-to-end testing, which relies on those devices that I mentioned, and really tries to closely imitate an actual user talking to a system. We offer the continuous testing that I mentioned, and then we also offer that usability performance testing that goes into making sure that the AI is functioning correctly. And it really focuses specifically and narrowly on the AI to improve that. So just to give you a quick feel for what these tests look like, to demystify it, this is an example of sort of the simplest possible test someone would write. This is launching an Alexa skill. And on the left-hand side, we say what we want to do. And on the right-hand side, we say what we're expecting to come back from the system in response. So really simple. We try to design this to be easy to read and write. You all can judge for yourself how easy it is. But it's, we're targeting non-technical users with this sort of test scripting syntax. You can get into doing more complex conversations, launch the skill, add something to a list, check what's on the list. You can use wildcards. You can get into checking just, complex aspects of the display response. Our start was really on Alexa and Google, where the displays have gotten very, very complicated. I would say, especially on Alexa. So we do have the ability to test all those things that Alexa does really in depth. But at the core of it, a lot of times people are just looking like, let's focus on the conversation, what's going back and forth. And this, for that, it's a very simple interface to put together. We have everyone from interns to, directors of compliance that use this, and, they're all able to use it, I would say, fairly proficiently. Sometimes with help from us, which we're very happy to give. We pride ourselves on really trying to make all of our customers very successful. And I'll just jump down to this slide. And part of what I would like to put into people's heads for this talk, especially seeing that there's more designers in the audience, is that when you're thinking about building for conversational AI, or really an AI system in general, there's sort of a parallel life cycle that's going on. And it's not like the dev life cycle goes away or typical design life cycle goes away, but you have this other part to it, which is really about the AI component. And it goes from, on the left-hand side, you want to gather data, and that gathering data when you're first starting out, that can just be a developer or someone sitting with a prototyping tool and putting together some utterances. It doesn't need to be really sophisticated, but you're immediately going into data gathering mode when you do that. With that, you're testing to see how well it performs. You're training and improving it. And then, once you put it out there in the next cycle, you're monitoring it to see what happens. And this sort of chain repeats itself basically over and over as you're designing, fine-tuning, and continuing to improve a bot over its entire lifetime. My experience with building and what got me into this was that I was maintaining my own speech recognition system that was at a fair degree of scale. And it's just, I was a CTO, but I wasn't spending that much time programming. I was just spending all this time in this loop. And it's an essential part of building these systems. I think a lot of you are probably familiar with it. But I think as, to the extent that we're an industry and we're looking at it, I think embracing this sort of life cycle is really, really a critical thing for success. And why is it so critical? This slide is actually from VoiceBot, and it just shows the number one thing people are looking for from smart speakers is how well it understands me when I speak. And I think if we had similar data, and it probably does exist, but for phone systems that people call, for chatbots, I think you'd see that it's a similar type of complaint that people have. It really can be very challenging to be understood by these systems, especially where voice is involved. Chatbots, it's maybe a little bit of a lesser challenge. And there's a variety of things that go into that. There's just the fact that these are evolving over time. The languages and the locales are daunting for both voice and chat. And then, where people are working across platform, across channels, all of those distinctions, they can become major issues. And so then I did just want to dive into the usability performance piece a little bit, just to give you a sense about, how this works in a bit more detail. So one, the starting point for what we're doing is we're measuring the current performance of the system. That should always be the starting point. A lot of the people we work with, they'll they'll say, we think it's good, or maybe it's good, or we have reports of problems. It's self-serving, but it's like, just to have an idea if it works, even if you find out that it's terrible or great, is going to put you on a better footing. And actually, we've seen customers where they went from being extremely concerned based on anecdotal data, and then they get the test results and they're like, oh, maybe we don't need you guys. This thing, it's not great or it's not perfect, but it's fine. So we try to come up with a variety of scenarios to test with, usually looking at the model, looking at user data, and use that to drive some initial testing. From there, we look at all the different results and we provide detailed guidance on how to fix things. We do assist our customers actually in improving those models. And depending on the system you're talking about, more sophisticated capabilities are becoming available. And I think the market is going to demand more over time. Yeah, a lot of what you have is synonyms. But synonyms work great, to a point. So you may have things where it's mistaking report for repair. Now, if repair is another intent in the system, it's maybe not so easy. Then you get into a more complex trade-off. But if it's just as simple as I said report and it came in repair, you just put it in there. A recent example I got, this is from Catherine Breslin, formerly of Cobalt Speech. She said, I'm building a skill on scientists, and it mistakes Marie Curie for Mariah Carey, which is just fantastic. That's a perfect example of where a synonym can really help. I'm sure if you plug that into the interaction model, it's solved. So going through that, we see people able to make really significant improvements, and there are more advanced techniques that will allow you to do it even, to get to even higher levels. But we typically see customers with like an 80% accuracy, and they're able to get to like a 95% just using sort of basic techniques. And that's a massive reduction in errors. That's a 75% reduction in errors. So that's really going to have a big impact on the customer experience that your users are having. And then you do get into more sophisticated use cases. This is a nice one. Well, this is based on on Seattle, but we've done some stuff with street addresses. Street addresses can be really funny. I think they highlight challenges you may have with speech recognition, but as well with the NLU. You know, it can be very difficult in terms of how people express things when it comes to numbers and locations to really understand what they're asking for. That's, when you get into that, I'm not going to say that there's like a magic bullet that just solves these issues. But again, and it may seem self-serving, this sort of getting into this testing cycle, it really, it's essential to actually provide a satisfying solution for customers. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, and this is not to be doom and gloom at all, but I have heard people say, and I was even in a forum recently where it was asserted that, you know, I mean, speech recognition is really a solved problem. And this is data that we got, we worked with Define Crowd. It's data that's not publicly available. So the systems were not trained on it. And the error rates for popular IVR systems, Connect, Dialogflow, and Twilio Voice, were very high. Now, this was noisy data, but I don't know about you all, but when I make phone calls, I'm not always in a perfectly quiet environment. And so it's, you know, you may have heard, okay, the accuracy rate for speech recognition is 95%, and it basically is the same as for a human speech recognizer. If you or I are trying to understand someone speaking. That's not correct. I mean, it's just not, there's still a lot of work to be done. It doesn't mean that the systems won't work, but it is something that needs to have attention paid. I'll put a link to this after I finish talking, but it's really interesting data. It's interesting to see where the state of the art is. And some of this, you know, these are testing IVR systems and the speech recognition with them. You know, some of it is about the configuration of the system itself. So it's not just the speech recognition, it's also everything else and how it works together. But it does show how you need to take sort of a holistic approach. And with that, well, I'll leave you with this. This is a case study that we did for a customer in Canada named Epcor, a utility company. And just, you know, we did all the stuff I've talked about. We did end-to-end testing, we did load testing, we did the usability performance testing. It really had a massive impact in a short period of time, really improved the performance, improved the confidence of the customer who was very, very nervous about going live. You know, which I think from what I've seen, and I think people will probably agree with this, I mean, just getting that confidence, you know, where people are building these new systems can be critical. So there are great outcomes with this, and all this is done, you know, fairly inexpensively and very quickly. So it's, yeah, that's what we do with Bespoken, and that's how we see testing fitting in. Thank you for that applause. That feels wonderful.
You're welcome. We have to simulate it somehow. You need an end cap to a talk. That's awesome. I really appreciate the focus on testing and the value it brings to any conversational design and development team, or kind of really the whole broad organization can really benefit from testing. I think you showed that. We had a question come in the chat, and it talks about the relationship between design and developers. And I know we have some developers here. We do have a lot of designers. And you talked about how, you know, you showed your demo of that testing interface and how it's like it's a development environment, but it's pretty simple for anyone to come in there and start defining tests. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, you know, how enterprise teams kind of, you know, what's the normal kind of back and forth? Who's in there in that console usually building those tests? And how does, maybe if a developer is doing that, interact with a designer to ensure that the outcome or the solution that that gets derived from the testing outcome is then fed back into the product?
I think that's a great question. I have to say it's one, I don't know that I have a good answer to it. Unfortunately, for us, we tend to come in after people have really built stuff. right? And it's, it's our opinion people should be testing from day one, but it's not the reality. And it's not even reality on stuff I build myself. And so a lot of times, by the time we get there, the designers are long gone, which I think is too bad, because there should be this interplay between the design and the development. We definitely see people build models where they're very much overreaching. It's perhaps unattainable what they're trying to do. And so if the testing had started sooner, it could have been solved. But we really, unfortunately, we don't see enough of that. I could probably think of a case, but it's not common. What we do, typically we are interacting with either the developers or the QA or the sort of business lead who's like, all right, I got to keep this thing working, or I got to deal with these complaints, and helping them to evolve and improve it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I advocate a ton for design in this space, and that's a very common kind of way that teams work, where design kind of, you throw something over the wall and then you leave and you go work on some other problem to design, and really you're building that product and should be a part of its life cycle. So for all the designers in the audience, advocate for these tools early. You should be sending your developers a Bespoken link, and then you can be a part of that process and you can be getting, involved in that testing scenario, because I think that's a great key point that, maybe a lot of companies aren't thinking that designers need to be there for that, but really that's kind of how you take those insights and iterate. So it's key for the design process.
Sounds a little bit more like the companies didn't see the benefit of testing until there were complaints coming in, because John, you mentioned complaints, and you come in to try to solve for those complaints, right? So
yeah, half our sales are like, it's like a director who got a call from the VP saying, I've been embarrassed because the system wasn't working, or another VP had a bad experience, and that's where we come in. We'd rather have been more proactive, but we'll take it.
Yeah. So a warning call to anyone who's a leader in this space, who can make those decisions. Get involved with this stuff earlier rather than later, because it'll probably save you some money and some effort and headaches down the road.
I think so. And I guess, I wish I could have tailored this presentation more to designers. I wish I even understood more of what that whole process is. I don't. But I will say what we do see is, like, if you have KPI early on that you can identify, that's a good place for us all to collaborate together. Because then you have something that everybody can work towards. And, I feel like I can articulate much better early in the process if there's some metrics around, like, this is what we need to achieve in terms of user recognition. And then, it doesn't feel so nebulous us pitching testing. It's like, yeah, of course we know that, the system engineering guy is going to pitch testing. It's like, no, I'll help you to get to this KPI.
Yeah. But we test, sorry.
No, sorry. I was just saying that is a key challenge, right? When it comes to user experience, designers and proponents of the whole design process being involved right on day one and sticking around even post deployment, because that's where a lot of the feedback comes in from end users. You may have a very strong test environment also, as well as end user testing, but there is so much of new stuff that comes in. There's so much of appropriation that is brought in by end users that you don't realize, right? And there is and that's when a lot of companies realize that, we do not have to automate the end-to-end of a workflow, because the initial process of identifying what is the key thing to automate, really automate, and what is the key thing that really needs to, change for let's say an IoT device to come into play or a voice experience to come into play. That usually gets done as an afterthought, and hence the call from the CEO saying something's gone wrong, please come and fix it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So many pitfalls in this nuanced, ever-changing, technology space. It's really exciting, but we do get into some of these spots where you can kind of tell people are going down the wrong path, or you only come to them after they have done that. And I think the biggest thing is just that, you don't want people to lose their desire to go after this space and to really try to leverage it and make value out of it. And so that's, why it's important that we all get together and talk about these things, so that we get those of us who have been through it, and these experts can share their perspectives and stories. We have some great conversation going on. I'm going to end this on a high note, and we're going to kick it over to Clubhouse. I'm going to get that room started. Thank you so much to our organizers, our fantastic speakers, and all of you who attended. We'll see you again in a month. Our next event is going to be in a morning time for our European friends. And so we'll see y'all then.
Thanks a lot, Lauren.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Take care, guys.